restaurant business is tough. It really is. And I think that one of the things that you find when a company goes public is everyone wants you to, beat those earnings from last year. And so people start looking for ways to, how do we do that? How do we attract customers that we don't currently have? The problem is when you start doing that, you start eroding who you are and you start losing some of that authenticity. And then over time, you end up with a concept that no one really recognizes.
I turned 50, y'all, and I started a podcast.
Really, age is just a number. It comes down to how we choose to live and the choices we make in our life, and those things accumulate.
Don't let the programming of life keep you from doing things every single day that make you happy.
When we feel good, it's easy to think good.
Life is not happening to you. You are your life. You are happening to your life. Hi, and welcome to the podcast. In this episode, I talked to Dan Ward. Dan Ward is a friend. He's a former next-door neighbor. He's my current real estate agent. And in this episode, we talk about the love of food. And as you know, food is one of life's most pleasurable activities. And we talk about the differences between eating for sustenance and eating for pleasure, and what it's like to dine in a restaurant that's really got their game dialed in, what it means to be a good patron of a restaurant, and just a little bit of Dan's story as well. I hope you enjoy this episode with Dan Ward. And remember, make today a good day to die. The philosophy of how we can take a little bit of each day or a lot of each day, depending on the day, and really, savor it, appreciate it, and at least take one part of every day and say, okay, I did something today that if today was my last day, I remembered this moment, this meal, this person, and when we were having dinner at your house, you're in Brittany's house last weekend, and we were talking about food, we were talking about restaurants. Every time I'm around you, I'm reminded about your love for food and your enjoyment of cooking it, eating it, sharing it. And it's really one of life's, as humans, it's like one of those basic, most human, necessary things that we do, eat, but it can be one of the things that is the most pleasurable. And so it just really inspired me when we were talking last weekend, and I wanted to, I don't know who else would be a better person to talk to about that subject. So that's why we're here.
Well, cool.
I know. So, I know that you used to be in the restaurant industry. I'd like to kind of just, if you wouldn't mind, share with me your story. Like, how'd you get to food, and then we'll find out how you got out of food. But
yeah, no, absolutely. I think everyone at some point probably works in the restaurant business at some phase in their life. It was my first job in high school. It was the first job that I actually had, bussing tables. But I think what got me started on food was my grandpa. He owned a restaurant. It was a diner up in Portland, Oregon, and he was the cook in the kitchen, and my grandma, she was the waitress. And they had this ongoing joke that he never told her how to take care of customers, and she never told him how to cook the food in the kitchen, and they got along great. But they had that for a long time, and he bought it from my great grandfather. And it was called Thorpe's Cafe, and it was this little diner in downtown Portland, and it was there for about 40 years.
Wow.
And it was a pretty cool spot. It was a local hangout, and I remember going there as a kid and going back and making milkshakes. And as a matter of fact, I still have the cash register that they used in the restaurant as like my piggy bank as a kid, but I still have it today.
Where is it?
And it's in our it's in our office. And it sits there, and I think the most expensive thing you can ring in is $2.99.
Oh,
Isn't that crazy?
So your great grandfather and your grandfather had it.
We're both in the restaurant business, yeah.
And did you work in that restaurant or did you just go and enjoy working or eating there?
No, I mean, I think my last memory of being in that restaurant was probably when I was like 5 years old.
Okay.
So, then they retired and they sold it and now it's something else. But yeah, that was the first time. And, they had this gigantic waffle maker that we still have, which is like a commercial style waffle maker. And whenever we go home and get together with my parents for holidays or whatnot, they always make waffles. So it's like a thing.
With that waffle maker.
With that waffle maker, yeah. And the thing weighs about 75 pounds. It's huge. They keep it in the garage, but it's cool. It's nostalgic. It makes me remember my childhood for sure.
Right.
But that's food, right? It brings back memories.
Right. Absolutely. So what was next? So that closed when you were young, and then what was your next experience? Your first job was a busser in a restaurant?
Yeah, so that planted the seed, right? I always kind of thought about food and restaurants, and growing up in a small town in Oregon, there really weren't that many restaurants. So you did a lot of cooking at home. And so that's what we did. My parents cooked. I liked to cook at a young age, kind of got into that, worked in the restaurant business. And then ultimately going to college. I mean, most kids in college work in some form of hospitality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Making tips, either waiting tables, bartending. And so that's what I did. And that led me to, going to college, obviously, and then getting my degree in hotel and restaurant management, and then working in that business directly out of college.
Okay, wait. Okay, wait. So back up. So when you were first of all, where did you go to college?
Okay, so I went to NAU. So they have a hotel and restaurant management program. Actually, it's through Scottsdale Community College, but you can get your degree from NAU. So you can take all your 100 and 200 level classes at SCC, and then you actually get your bachelor's degree from NAU. And that's what I did. It was a satellite program.
So the whole time you got to stay in Scottsdale?
Yes, correct.
That is really cool.
It was cool. I mean, because I had started out at ASU. That was my first round. And then I kind of, life happens and you start to figure out what you want to do when you grow up. And I really had decided while I was in college working in the restaurant business that I think I want to make this a career. And I had a friend that was going to do with that program. So that led me to that. And then one thing led to another. And then that was it. So I did the program. I didn't have to move up to Flagstaff, which was awesome because living here in Scottsdale, you're able to work in some of the best restaurants, hotels in the country. We have all that right here. And up in Flagstaff, you're pretty limited.
Yeah, for sure.
So I worked at the Princess while I was in college, waiting tables there. And then that led me to really wanting to, as I was getting closer to graduation, wanting to find some sort of a startup restaurant concept that I could go to work for and then learn and then hopefully grow with it. And that's what led me to work at a local startup company called Kona Grill. Mm-hmm. And that's what it was.
So wait, how did you know, or what gave you the idea that you wanted to specifically work for a startup restaurant? I mean, what put that idea in your head?
I think it was just, being young, being ambitious, wanting to be part of some kind of growth. I wanted to be part of something that had, that was going to could go beyond like the four walls of a restaurant, where you could, have other opportunities. Because once you start opening up more restaurants, then there's a lot more opportunity for positions and growth, and that's what I'd wanted at the time.
That's really interesting, though. I mean, I would just think for people who are graduating from that program, I would think that most people are like, where can they go get any kind of amazing job in a restaurant? But I think it's interesting that you specifically were targeting a startup. And then how do you research companies that are doing that? How did you find that opportunity?
Honestly, I got lucky. I went to work for, I think most restaurants, if you talk to most restaurateurs, very few will say, I only want one or I only want two. Everyone has aspirations of, having a restaurant, having to be successful, seeing it grow, and possibly multiplying that and making it big. I think at least that's how I was. And so I was looking for something that wasn't just going to work for an already established big company. I wanted to be part of something that was new, young, fresh, agile, That's what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of, and of course I got lucky and then I found it.
How?
Because how did I find it? I found it by chance, really.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually, it was at the time, it was another concept that was called Sushi on Mill.
Okay.
And it was the same owners, but they opened up a concept called Sushi on Mill. I was living in Tempe at the time, and it was going to be a new hot restaurant that was opening up right on Mill Avenue. And so I went to work for that concept. And then just as a waiter in college. And then I was the Sunday closing manager while I was finishing school. And then after I ended up graduating, I got a full-time management position with them. And they had aspirations of growing. And I liked that. They were a big restaurant family from Minnesota. And it was exciting. It was something that I could feel some energy. I could tell that they had ambition and we got along well, and it seemed like a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
But being part of that concept, being part of a restaurant that is trying to figure out who they are, what's their hook going to be? What's going to make them different? Is it something that can travel? Does it resonate with somebody in Arizona and somebody in Omaha, Nebraska? Because that's not an easy thing to do. But Arizona is a great test market for restaurants because it's such a melting pot of people from all over the country.
Right.
If you can make it in Arizona, chances are you can travel.
Go ahead. That's really, really cool.
Yeah. So then we ended up, so I got to be a part of that on a management level, kind of tweaking the concept, communicating back and forth, what's working, what's not working. And probably before we were really ready to open up the next location, we went ahead and did it. And that was when we opened up the Fashion Square Mall location, which was the first location for Kona Grill.
Really?
Yeah.
God.
So that was, and this was going back to, this is 1998 when that opened. And when we opened, it wasn't going well. It was a mess. It was right when, if you remember a concept called Roy's.
Yes.
Now they're owned by Outback Steakhouse, but it was Roy Yamaguchi. He opened up this restaurant in Hawaii and he started expanding it, brought a location to Scottsdale, and it was the hottest restaurant in town.
Where was that?
And it was on Indian Bend and Scottsdale Road.
Okay.
So do you know where Roca Accor is
Yeah.
right now? Okay, so it's just south of that in that shopping mall.
Okay.
So we ended up opening up Kona, and if you've been there, you know that the upstairs right now is a bar. It's an indoor-outdoor bar with a patio, but at the time it was a private dining room. And then downstairs there was it was more fine dining. We had tablecloths. We served rack of lamb on the menu, and we're in a mall.
Yeah.
And a lot of the restaurant business is trial and error. You kind of figuring out what's working, what's not working, because a lot of times what you think is going to work doesn't work. We ended up getting rid of the sushi bar completely because we thought it was going to be too hard to execute. And the concept was just flailing. So one thing led to another. We went through a bunch of management. We went through a bunch of chefs. And then ultimately, based off of true necessity and just literally losing money every month, we're like, okay, we need to go back to what we know that works. So let's get rid of the private dining room upstairs. We're going to put in a bar.
Yeah.
We're going to add a happy hour. We're going to tweak the concept, make it more approachable. We're not going to be fine dining. We're going to be an American grill with a sushi bar.
Interesting.
And we did it, and it just took off.
Really?
It did. And so going back, and then I became the general manager of that location. I believe it was in 2000 or 2001, right around that time. So about 2 years after it opened. At that point, we really had figured out who we were and who we were going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then the concept just started like cranking.
Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind, we were right next door to the original P.F. Chang's at the time.
In the mall?
In the mall. I don't know. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah.
But is that a strategy, like to put yourself next to what might be construed as your competition?
I mean, they were our competition in the sense that they were in the same, not the same type of cuisine, but they were a similar price point. They were upscale casual is what we called it. and they were high volume. We were going after the same customer.
But it's also
And
Asian food, Asian inspired, or
it is. I mean, at the time, they were, Chang's was specifically Chinese,
yeah.
and we were an American Grill with a sushi bar. So yeah, there were some, Asian elements, but they
Oh,
really were really different. We didn't have any competing menu items.
I see. I
It
see.
was very different.
See, when I think of Kona Grill, I think of an Asian steakhouse.
Okay.
Is that not what it is at all?
Well,
Okay,
keep in mind it's
interesting.
changed. I haven't been there for 15 years. I haven't
Work
worked there
there.
for 15 years. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely a American.
American Grill.
Yeah, think of more like a Houston's with a sushi bar.
But
Yeah.
Kona is what? That's an island in Hawaii? Did you guys have a branding company do the branding, or did you guys do it yourself?
There were a couple of different branding companies that came and went, but for the most part, it was just us that didn't really know what we were doing, to be honest with you, and kind of figuring it out as we went. And it was
Wow.
a name that was chosen in the beginning that we kind of deviated away from what it was with the menu, but we never obviously changed the name. But it just kind of became more of synonymous with just it's an American grill. It's got some Asian influence and a sushi bar.
And a sushi
But
bar.
it was the place where people could come to. There's always one person in the group that says, "I don't eat fish," or "I don't like seafood," or "I don't eat sushi." And because of that, when you're thinking about going out to dinner with a group of like 5 or 6 people, they might be the deciding factor in saying, "You know what, we're not going to go to a sushi bar because one person doesn't eat sushi." So we were your alternative. We were the place you could go if the one person wanted sushi, or if one person didn't want sushi. We were
Mhm.
your go-to.
It's really, really, really interesting. So while you worked there, how many total locations were there when at their height while you were still working for them?
So when I worked there, I was there up until 2007. The company went public in 2005.
Public.
And yeah, yeah. They had big aspirations. They wanted to raise money. That was an inexpensive way to do it. But our second location was the Chandler Mall down there. That way we had good success in malls. And then the next location was Kansas City, Missouri. And that was done strategically to test, can we travel? Can we take this concept to the heart of the Midwest, and is it going to fly? And what we found is it did. It really resonated. And Kona was a great concept to go to that kind of a market, which I would say is like a B plus market. Whereas if you think about like Newport Beach, Beverly Hills,
Right.
Las Vegas, those are all A plus
Right.
markets. Very competitive, very expensive. You put a lot on the line, a lot of risk going there.
Hmm.
Hard to find employees, that sort of thing. But going to, Kansas City, Missouri, and then Omaha, Nebraska, and Carmel, Indiana, all those locations that we chose, they killed it. Those
Really? So
locations.
that was
Yeah,
you found your lane, which was those B plus locations. I'm wondering
correct.
too, if you go to places like in the Midwest and you have a Kona grill, which is an American grill that people can totally resonate with, but you also have the sushi bar. So it allows people to branch over into sushi, um, in a kind of a more trusted environment because it's,
Yeah, like have you been to Omaha?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or okay, so before we were in Omaha, for the most part, people that have exposure to sushi in Omaha that was in the grocery store. I
Wow.
mean, that was
Right,
other than maybe some mom and pop that
right.
might be
That
not very clean.
right, that you're afraid to go to. You're not, unless you're like a yeah. So it worked, right? You were
Absolutely.
bringing it into it's like bringing a PF Chang somewhere. They're gonna trust it because it's like a
Yeah.
brand. Yeah.
It's a brand. It's something that's different. It's something that, you're delivering, um, you're delivering an experience for somebody living in Omaha,
Right.
maybe in the middle of winter. They can't wait for their next vacation
Right.
so they can go, eat and try something new and
Right.
experience something different, but you're bringing it to them.
That's amazing. So they expanded into a bunch of other markets. So how many locations were you up to?
We had, when I left, we had 17 locations.
Wow.
Yeah. And I oversaw operations for them. So it was a big job. I was traveling a ton. And in the restaurant business, I mean, let's face it, something is always going wrong
Yeah, yeah.
somewhere in the restaurant business.
So were you hooked up at this point, or at some point did you guys hook up with a franchise development company?
No, we wanted to do it all in house. So we were expanding our corporate structure to meet the needs of the restaurants. Our corporate office was based, what was right on Camelback and Scottsdale Road. And all of our operations were run out of this market.
I'm surprised when you partnered or when you got, I don't know, so you didn't get venture capital money, you took it public to get that kind of money. Is that right?
In the beginning, it was venture capital money, and then one of the venture capital guys that was our main guy ended up taking it public through.
Got you.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised that when you hooked up with the venture capital people, they didn't require you to at least have a consulting franchise consultancy they really must have trusted your guys' management team.
Well, we didn't open up a second location until our original location was killing it. The concept was really tweaked and fine tuned. By the time we started opening stores, there really wasn't that much change happening in terms of the menu.
You had
overall
worked out
concept.
all the bugs. You had worked out all the bugs. You spent all that time just really getting your brand totally solid before you opened up number two.
We did, yeah. So I mean, if I think back on it, I mean, we were under 6,000 square feet, and this is going back. Keep in mind, so 2000. So we're talking 22 years ago. We were 5,800 square feet, I believe. We were doing $6 million a year in sales. The restaurant selling, $2 Bud Lights during happy hour and $2.50 California rolls. And that square footage, that kind of volume is intense. You're busy all the time. You're on a wait during every meal period, 7 days a week.
What was your profit margin on that?
We cash flowed it was right around, on average, it would be like 25%. On a really good month, we might brush 30% cash flow.
Is that before debt service?
That was in the restaurant, right? So obviously the corporate office had G&A expenses that, they fed to. But in terms of the actual restaurant,
25, 30%. That's
yeah.
amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's incredible. So when you had 17 locations, what year was that?
That would have been 2007.
So what happened?
They ended up.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So after I left, they continued to expand, and I followed it for quite a while, and then kind of paid a little less attention to it over time. But they ended up getting up to, I believe it was like 42 locations.
And you left in 2007?
Yeah, they did some additional capital raises, whatnot, and then in 2000, I think it was 2019. They ended up going bankrupt or filing for bankruptcy. They had completely over leveraged. They had taken on an international partner trying to do some stores overseas. They operationally started really struggling with some of the locations that they had opened. Restaurant business is tough.
I know.
It really is.
I know.
And I think that one of the things that you find when a company goes public is everyone wants you to, beat those earnings from last year. And so people start looking for ways to, how do we do that? How do we attract customers that we don't currently have? Well, maybe now we start adding menu items to fill holes, to think, well, if we did this, maybe we could attract more business. The problem is when you start doing that, you start eroding who you are.
Yeah.
And you start losing some of that authenticity. And then over time, you end up with a concept that no one really recognizes and doesn't have the same feel that it had when it initially became successful.
Yeah. It's so interesting. You just talking about all the different dynamics and challenges, in a restaurant business. I mean, there are some obviously unique challenges to the restaurant industry, but business in general, I mean, just the idea of what happens when you go public, and then the kind of pressure on the investors or the shareholders. They're looking at the bottom line and the dividends and the pressure to perform. It can make you make decisions that you wouldn't have normally made, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really
There's pressure to open locations that maybe you shouldn't have opened.
right.
There's pressure to grow when maybe you shouldn't grow. So there's a lot of competing forces out there.
Did you see, just as a side note, did you see we crashed on, was it Netflix that was on recently about the founder of WeWork, the guy who
Oh yeah.
did you watch that?
I haven't seen that one yet, no.
Yeah.
But I did watch Bad Vegan though.
We're in the middle of it. We're in the middle of it.
Okay.
Yeah, we're in the middle of it. But I was just thinking, and he was, in the WeWork, he was in the commercial real estate, or the not commercial real estate, in the what do you call it? The shared
Office space, right?
shared office space, yeah.
Yes.
And every time he got more money, he he knew what the return on investment that his investor required. And so they started making all of these decisions, getting new space, leasing new space, signing new contracts, you know, with really horrible terms in order to satisfy the ROI that they were working towards. But I think the restaurant business has so many additional unique challenges. I also spent a lot of time in restaurants, from college and into my late 20s. And my uncle was in the restaurant business for years as an operations manager, and then a regional manager for the Hungry Hunter chain that is really no longer. But and then he brought the Famous Dave's franchise to Reno, and well, we opened a Famous Dave's in Reno, in Chico, and in there one other Northern California city. But 10 years later, only one of those restaurants is alive and well. So out of three, two of them are now closed. And that's a well-established franchise. Like Famous Dave's is a very high likelihood of success if you set it up correctly and you do a good thing. But I always admire and I'm shocked at anybody who, number one, goes into business, or number two, who wants to go into the restaurant business, because it's like you've got food spoilage, you've got probably every employee sucking some kind of food or drink off of you every single day.
Yeah, you have a ton of theft, right? You have turnover.
Oh, turnover.
You have all those things that make it really tough. But you know what? When it's good,
Is it good?
it's so good.
It's good.
It's really good.
So
like when you're, yeah.
What were you going to say? Go ahead and finish what you were going to say.
I was going to say, when you're, for all that, right? When it's a Friday night and it's, 7:30, like prime dining hour, and you're on an hour and a half, 2-hour wait, and you're fully staffed, everybody showed up that day, right? And you've got a good front of house staff, you've got a great back of house staff, and you're flowing. The kitchen's putting out food, ticket times are where they should be, food quality is coming out of the kitchen and it looks beautiful, customers are happy, they're getting great service, the restaurant's full and there's that energy.
Yeah.
It's really hard to replicate that.
It's fun.
In anything else. It's just fun. And to see that all happening, seeing that machine work,
Yeah.
is pretty cool.
It is like when all of those elements are there, it is like this symphony that's happening. When
It really
if
is.
people are in sync and they're enjoying what they do. And yeah, I mean,
When I was thinking about this talk today that we were going to have, I think one of the things I was thinking about was when you had mentioned that, what's one of the things I loved about the restaurant business and what made it something I wanted to pursue as a career. And I think about it, it's like, where else can you go? Where else do we go where we get to experience all of our five senses at once? It's taste, it's touch, it's smell, it's sound, it's what you see, it's all these components. What else, what other businesses provide that kind of experience where you're literally giving everybody all those things? And which is why I think people have such, intense reactions to either liking or disliking what they experience when they go out,
Yes.
because you're literally hitting them on every level.
Yes. And it's something, and I'll speak for myself because I know I absolutely love to go out to dinner. Like I love to go out to dinner, and I'm so happy to be living in this city where we have endless, supply of amazing restaurants. But I count it as like one of my prime enjoyments of life. Like it is the highlight of my day if I'm going to be going out to dinner. And so I am very sensitive to the experience, right? And you're right. Sometimes if it's too loud and you can't talk, or if it's too quiet and you hear things in the kitchen, or if
It's
there's,
too cold,
yeah, what's that air conditioning coming down on me or
Yeah,
whatever, um, or I mean, there's so many different things, but it can, if something is off on the balance, it can throw the whole experience off. And
absolutely.
yeah.
Like, have you ever walked into a restaurant and gone, like, I love sitting in a bar when I go out, going into a bar and sitting at the bar, and you get that kind of funky bar smell,
Yes.
and I have such a hard time with that, having been in the restaurant business, because you know what it's
No,
from,
tell me.
right?
Tell me. Let's get into
You
it.
know, it's probably coming from a drain, right? That probably hasn't been cleaned. When you think about what's going down the drains in a restaurant, there's a lot of grease, right? There's a lot of syrupy, sticky, sugary type substances. Can be, and you think behind a bar, a lot of what they're serving can attract fruit flies, things like that. And so you really have to stay on top of cleanliness in a bar. But if you get that bar stench, is what I call it, you can pretty much guarantee that somebody's not doing what they should be doing behind there in terms of cleanliness. And that's all I can think about when I'm sitting there. If you smell something like that.
Right, right. So, right, it can the scent of anything, or even just last night we did go to PF Chang's, by the way, and I used to enjoy that restaurant for whatever it's worth, but the location at at the Fashion Square, it felt like a cafeteria. I felt like I was at a cafeteria last night. I mean, you walk in and there's empty tables that people have left, and there's just food on the floor underneath the tables, and like I mean, I know that everybody's having staffing issues too, so they probably are not the fullest, most complete staff to where they can have all of the jobs being handled all the time, but yeah, it was really really interesting. So let's see, what do we want to talk about? So, talk a little bit more about the art of the restaurant, and I think you're hitting on one of the aspects of the art, which is hitting all of those senses and having them all work together with the team and everything like this. But what are some other specific things that you think restaurateurs and what is there that creates that magic or that spark or that hit? I know you love Houston's. You use as an example for different things, but can you give me some examples of when restaurants hit something really right and it's really good?
It's a good question. And I think it's changed a little bit over time. When you think back, remember back in the, say, like, I would say late 80s, early 90s, when it was all about the theme restaurant,
Yeah,
and you saw all the themed restaurants come about, and it was the Rainforest Cafe.
I was thinking the
Place,
Rainforest Cafe.
yeah, people wanting to provide people some sort of a adventure in dining that was different. Their food was never really that exciting, but the atmosphere was just really like amped up. Places like that. I think what's changed now is that, people have gotten away in a chain, which was what we were aspiring to be, is almost now looked a little upon negatively to the consumer. The consumer today wants an authentic experience. They want to take me, how many times have you said when you're in a town that you've maybe never been to before, take me someplace that I can't, or take me to someplace I can't get back where I'm from.
Yeah.
Take me to someplace different. That's what people want, I
Yeah.
think. So restaurants have had to figure out, how do they go about connecting with today's consumer who wants an authentic experience? And if you are going to be a chain restaurant, how are you going to provide unique experiences in a chain environment and make it good enough to where people want to come back again and again and again? And it's tough.
It is tough. Do you think it's impossible, or like, what about just the individual location chef owned restaurant? Like, is it possible to make a living off of that? And do you think that those are making a comeback, or is it always, I want to have 2 locations, 3 locations, I want to take this? I mean,
I think the hard part is it's difficult in most cases to make a living off of a single restaurant.
really?
And not to, in some cases, and beyond that, you think about the purchasing power of a single restaurant. You pay more for everything. It's the economies of scale, right? The price you pay for, your food, your alcohol, all those are all dictated based on how much you're purchasing.
Right.
So, if you have, and there is a sweet spot, if you can open up a few restaurants in a single market and leverage some of that buying power, you can save significant dollars to take those to the bottom line. Plus, you think about your staffing, you got to have career paths for people, right? You got to be able to show people, hey, if you come in and you work hard, one day you too can get to this level. And if you have a single unit, that's a difficult thing to provide for people. You're stuck with looking for kind of that, having that transitory worker that comes in. Maybe you get a year out of them, maybe you get 2 or 3 or 4 if you're lucky. But at the end of the day, where are they going to go? And unless they want to be a server for the rest of their life.
Yeah. Well,
so there's a sweet spot there.
Yeah, and do you think though, in different cultures besides the United States, that maybe, like, I wish being a server or being a restaurant manager or being a bartender, I feel like it could and should be, to be able to be a career. Like, there is an art to those positions, specifically restaurant servers and bartenders. I mean, I feel like it should be in and of itself enough. There should be enough reward financially and emotionally and, all of it. And I wonder, in other cultures, is it more possible to make, a living and to support a family, or, because
Well, and I do think there are probably restaurants, not a lot of them, but there are some in the United States where that is the case. I think that so much of it has to do with the restaurant manager, and I think that gets overlooked in a lot of cases, because you think about, the manager has, how many times have you called a restaurant and you have and your first interaction is with a host or a hostess, and it maybe isn't pleasant, or they're really underqualified to be answering the phone and answering questions about anything. And, maybe it's a matter of, hey, I want to make a reservation at this time. And the answer is, sorry, we're full. There's no, well, hey, what about this? Or, how do we take that interaction and actually turn it into something positive as opposed to just sorry?
right.
And and that all comes from the, inner management within that restaurant, who may or may not be well paid, who who probably has varying degrees of talent. How pumped up are they getting the servers and the staff for a pre-shift meeting, right? Are they excited about going out there and selling and providing great service? Are they putting all their aces in their places and making sure they've got the right people in the right locations? Are they fully staffed for the day?
Yeah.
What kind of service experiences are they going to provide to people? I mean, there's so many things that lead to it. Like, we were talking about the experience at P.F. Chang's, where there's dirty tables and no one's paying attention, and That is a common story in today's restaurant world, and it's sad, but it's very. I think it's all over the place.
So speaking of hostesses, I will tell you, and calling, I called yesterday to 2 restaurants because as you know, I was looking for a place to take my dad. And after you and I had talked about Houston's, well, I mean, we've talked about it multiple times. I still have not gone to
Yeah,
that damn restaurant. I'm going to make it
you got to check it
I'm
out.
going to make a reservation this week. I'm going to take my dad and Garrick and my dad's friends coming into town. Anyway, I'm going to take them to Houston's. But I called Houston's yesterday and I said, you know, it was 6:30 at night, and I said on a Saturday, and I said, you know, how long is the wait for 2 people? And she said, right now the wait is about an hour. She said, but you're welcome to come in and put your name in, and you know, we'll get you in as soon as possible. Which I thought was cool that she didn't just say it's about an hour. You know, she gave me an option. Why don't you come in? You
Sure.
know, that was cool. Then I called PF Chang's after you recommended, because my dad wanted Chinese food. So I called PF Chang's and I said, how long is the wait for 2 people? And she goes, first of all, she said, hey, how's it going? Like after I, you know, she like first, she just had a nice human communication with me. I said, oh, I'm doing good. Thanks. She goes, right now, it's probably about 15 minutes, but I can put your name down right now and then you can just come and we'll get you seated. I'm like, yes.
Done.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And so I love that because and I mean they were on their hostess game, let me just tell you, at PF Chang's last night, because then when I walked in, another girl, she's like, oh hi, yeah, hi Joanna, yep, I got your name right here, you know, we're going to be right with you. And then the other hostess walked up when she was seating us and she gave me like a compliment and just was really friendly. I'm like, ooh, they got their hostess game. And the but yeah, it's not always like that. It's not always like that, definitely. But what I was getting at, what I was thinking of when you were saying that about how important the middle management is and how they staff and how they train and like the philosophy, I always go back to this idea. I mean, I've never necessarily, when I worked in restaurants, I loved it. Like, I thought it was so much fun when I was a hostess, when I was a waitress, when I was a bartender. Like, I loved physically doing those activities. So, uh, it was a fun job for me. And, you know, and so I was happy and I wanted to do good. But I have found generally as a business owner that if you want to encourage like an ownership mentality, because really what that is, it's an ownership mentality. It's like, let's all get to our stations. Let's all get to our most skilled stations. We're going to put people where they're most suited. We're going to all get to our stations, and our goal, like we're going to have an overarching goal of making sure every person that interacts with this restaurant tonight is satisfied, gets what they want, leaves happy, you know, that we got to have this overarching goal. It can't be my job is to take this order and submit it to the kitchen. Like it can't be that. There's got to be this overarching, we are part of this whole organism that's working together to create an overarching goal. And my point that I'm getting to is in different businesses that I've owned, I feel like one of the only ways to get to that ownership mentality is to do some kind of revenue sharing or bonus profits, you know, bonuses on profit, or, you know, so that people actually feel like they have an impact on the bottom line, you know, and then that's going to translate into, you know, their pay, you know, their paycheck.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting concept that there are some people that are trying to kind of try some different things in the restaurant business right now. I don't know if you're familiar with a guy named Danny Meyer. He owns Union Square Hospitality. He founded Shake Shack. He has Gramercy Tavern in New York City. He's like a rock star restaurateur in New York. And, you know, his recent thing, he's been pretty well published on this, is that he doesn't accept tips at his restaurants. So everything is built in to the price. And then he pays his staff a considerable wage for whatever job it is they're doing. And it's widely known that this is just how they operate. He wants to be able to, pay, $35, $40 for a line cook, or whatever he sees fit. And then that's just going to be reflected in a higher menu price.
Wow.
Which is interesting that people are starting to think about maybe a different way to approach the whole tipping. But also I remember having talks with my staff, a pre-shift meeting where you're getting people pumped up, and servers, I think they're underappreciated, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it's typically a transitional time in someone's life, where they're a server. Maybe they're in school, maybe they dropped out of school, maybe they're trying to get back into school, maybe they are just, this is what they're going to be for right now, whatever the situation. And then you go home for the holidays, and you've got that aunt or uncle or brother or sister, and hey, what are you doing? I'm waiting tables. And there's always that element of like, oh, somehow you're a little lower class because you work in the restaurant business, or you're just a server, or just a bartender. And I used to spend so much time talking to people, telling them, you are not just a server, you're not just a busser, you're not just a food runner or a bartender. You're a frontline salesperson for a multi-million-dollar organization that went public and that is in multiple states across the U.S. That's what you're a part of.
Wow.
And that's what you should be going home feeling good about. Because the reality of it is, you're probably making between $40,000 and $75,000 a year, and this is 20 years ago. You know what I mean?
Wait, who's making
in a busy restaurant?
Who's making between 40 and 70? A server.
A server or a bartender.
Yeah.
Now, those are the highest paid positions typically in the restaurant. A lot of cases, those people are making more money than some of the entry-level managers. It's not uncommon to, take a pay cut as an entry-level manager.
Right. I imagine you would be an amazing manager.
You know what? I was really a confident operator.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that if I was in a restaurant, there's certain things that you could do to ensure that you're going to have a great night, which is going to mean higher sales. And I'm very competitive too in that sense. So, we would track our sales. I used to like to go around to different restaurants and say, hey, you know what? What's the best, day we've ever done? How can we maybe through some efficiencies, turning tables, just being, good about how we even set up the dining room, because it's a puzzle that you're putting together. You've got this many people that want to come in. You've got this many seats available. How do we most efficiently use that space and maximize our sales? Mm-hmm. Because if you're on a 45-minute wait to an hour wait and you've got empty tables, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Now, of course, there's a lot of different variables there. I mean, it could be the kitchen can't keep up, and that's a whole other problem, right? Or it could be a lot of things.
Well, that's the thing. In a restaurant, you're spinning all these different things. I mean, you can't control. I mean, you got to be able to manage the kitchen with the servers, because the kitchen can be putting food out, but if the servers aren't processing their tables, or if the bar is not, I mean, even last night I was sitting next to this other table, and I could see that the waiter walked up to the table and they said, oh yeah, and remember I ordered a Moscow Mule or something, and the server's like, yep, it's going to be right up at the bar. Well, like 10 minutes later, I saw him go finally bring this guy this mule, and I mean, if that was me, I would have been like, holy cow. That's one of my pet peeves as a server, because I've been a server, and also just knowing about business ownership and management. If you should never let somebody's glass get empty before you are offering to get them another one, or you got to know how long your bar is taking. So if you know it's going to be an extra 5 minutes, ask them when it's halfway gone. I mean, the last thing you want somebody to do is sit there waiting for a cocktail that they're paying, $8, $9, $10, $12, $15 for. And then they're just pissed. And
so let me ask you this. Don't you think that your server and that attitude that they approach your table with, and the care that they approach your table with, the knowledge of the menu that they have or don't have, their timeliness and friendliness can completely dictate how much you're willing to spend on any given night?
Absolutely. And just my general enjoyment. Yeah.
And it could be wildly different.
Absolutely.
Based on that one person in front of you. It could be, you know what? I get that this person isn't really, feeling their job tonight. and maybe for whatever reason is kind of projecting some, like when you go into a steakhouse and you ask, hey, what's your favorite steak on the menu? I don't eat meat. And that's the
Ridiculous.
response.
That's ridiculous.
You know what I mean? That kind of a thing. So going that route, or like when we went to Ocean 44 that one night, and you have a server that's engaging and fun, and all of a sudden it's like espresso martinis for dessert, and well, maybe we wouldn't have done that if he hadn't suggested it.
Right.
But it's kind of, they play such a role in that. And you think about what that means to the bottom line for the actual restaurant owner is monumental. And I think it's underappreciated.
I do too. I really do too. And I always, I'm always totally hyper aware of the service I get in a restaurant. And I'm working on being hyper aware and not hyper judgmental or critical. And I always, I have empathy, and I want to kind of like understand what's going on. And I'm really willing the person. It's like, I'm just willing you to embrace this position you have right now. Just be in this moment, in this relationship with me right now, because I want you to do well. Like I want this to be good for you and good for me. The best service I've had in a long time was when I went with my aunt and uncle and Garrick to Maple and Ash a couple weeks ago. And it felt like being at your and Brittany's house. I felt like I was a guest at someone's house. I was a guest in their home, and it was just all about my experience and all about our experience at the table.
Were you celebrating, or was it just a night out?
It was just my aunt and uncle were visiting Scottsdale, and I thought take them to someplace special, and because that's a $200 per person meal. I mean, but
and did that server? I'm guessing the server played a big role in your experience.
Oh, he was amazing. Like at first, we're like, is he the waiter, or is he just like welcoming us into this room in the restaurant? Like we weren't even sure, because he was so like. It was like, welcome to my home. I mean, he wasn't dramatic like that.
Like this is my station, but this is my restaurant, right? Like that's how it's that ownership of your experience is on my shoulders, and I'm going to make sure it's awesome.
And not one time was I ever interrupted. Did I ever feel rushed? Did I ever wait on anything? So, I mean, that's really the art, is don't interrupt me, don't rush me, and don't make me wait, right? I mean.
Yeah. And that is an art, right? Because all those things can be conflicting at sometimes, right? You might have to wait if I'm not reading your timing correctly, and I might interrupt you if I am worried about getting your order into the kitchen fast enough to where it's not going to get bogged down. So it is an art.
It's an art. Maybe you should write a book on the art of serving.
It's funny. I was looking at the title of your podcast, A Good Day to Die. And it's funny. I think sometimes I have a hard time ordering in a restaurant because I want to order. I kind of have a tendency to order like it's always going to be my last meal. And I want to know what the best thing on the menu is from the server if I haven't been there before. I'm like, give me your top 5 things. I always say that. And I always hate it when people say, oh, everything's good. Well, I mean, there's always something that you do exceptional. So give me those 5 things in all the different categories, from appetizer to dessert. And usually you can kind of get, I think, a better experience by servers know what's good, right? They see what's coming out of the kitchen. They see what's getting sent back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the whole good day to die, it's like, eat like it's your last meal.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And it's not only let's eat like the best thing on the menu and the thing that the chef wants to cook. So I also pay attention to specials, although I want to ask you about specials, but give me a second. We'll go back to that. But it's like, if we're going to do this, if we're going to go through this exercise, we're going to go to a restaurant, we're going to have to make reservations, we're going to get dressed, we're going to go there, we're going to sit there for an hour and a half, we're going to spend this money, let's have something that we're really, really, really going to enjoy and savor. Um, and if that means, so then I think about, okay, if we did that 4 times a week, I mean, I probably go out 4 times a week. And if I did that 4 times a week, what that means is I'm going to gain 10 pounds in a year, which is exactly what I've done. But I figured out what the answer is to that, which is order exactly what you want, order it all, order whatever you want, and then just eat half of it. Just don't eat the whole thing.
Yeah,
You know what I
right.
mean? Like just eat a small, and I know like you and Britt, when you're at home, you try to make really, really good choices,
Right.
healthy, healthy, healthy. And then when you go out, you're like, I'm going all in, I'm going all in, because this idea, there's two ways to eat. One is eating for fuel and eating for sustenance. And then there's eating for pleasure, right? I mean, I feel like food is like sex. It's like all humans have a desire, a need for it. And I don't know if we die without sex, but you know what I mean. It's part of being human. It was a human need.
Right.
Food, similarly, obviously we have to have it or die, but it can be so pleasurable. And it's like, to miss out on that aspect of our humanness, at least some of the time. Obviously we don't want to be gluttonous and like all the time just like but to savor those moments and to really appreciate people who are trying to do it right. But can you talk a little bit about that, about eating for sustenance and nutrition compared to eating for pleasure? And what is your philosophy about that in your own life?
Yeah, I mean, for for me, I mean, I like to eat, I really do. But I also have found, I think, the older I get, certain foods make me feel better than others, right? So then you make choices based off of some of that, and you can really combine the two. You can, I think, find foods that taste delicious and then also are good for you. I have a hard time, like, I'm not a sweets guy, but I love a salty appetizer, you know, and all those things. But for me, I think it's because we like to go out a lot. I have to do what you were saying, which is make probably better choices than I would otherwise if I was going out for an occasion.
Right. And so in your life, what would you say is you say you typically eat for pleasure or for sustenance, or you have to do some of, like when you're at home, like how do you?
I think it's a combo. It's, you're always kind of struggling to find that balance. There's certain times I'm better at it than others. Right now, kind of getting ready for the summer, we're like, trying to be healthy, make better choices. But then, when winter's here and it's, it doesn't get light in the morning until 8 o'clock. It's
Yeah.
like, well, that's a little different,
Yeah, I know. I know. I was thinking.
And the heat too. I feel like what the temperature kind of dictates too, like the different kinds of food I like to eat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been feeling lately, I've been really struggling with this weight gain, and trying to figure out. I've been trying to I want to blame it on 10 different things. And I keep circling back to I'm putting more into my body than my body needs to operate. Do you know what I'm saying? I
It
mean,
really is. I mean, for all of us, right? It's just calories in, calories out.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
I know. So what would you say as far as somebody who goes to a restaurant as a customer? So we've kind of already talked a little bit about what the server can do. What would you say as a customer? Because you've been a restaurant manager, operator. What does the consumer need to know? What do they need to not do? What do they need to stop doing, or what do they need to wake up and do? This is your public service announcement to restaurant customers everywhere.
I think I would say the biggest thing is, and this is pretty elementary, but what you project is what you're going to get in return.
Yeah.
In terms of just how you approach, I think, any person. And I think now that may not always be the case, But there's been times I know that we've gone into restaurants and I could tell our server was off, and if you take a minute to just ask them about their day, because keep in mind, these people all they're doing is taking care of others all day long. And we've all, in different parts of our life, probably play that role. But these guys do it as a job, 8 hours a day. So I think being human, communicating in a good way with your server can really kind of set the tone for how your experience is going to go. If you bring an attitude, I think, into any situation, I think you're going to get an attitude in return. So I think that, and I also think that for the most part, when most people dine, they're good, but I think that, it is food, right? Although it's important to have an experience. I don't think that it's not life and death.
Right.
It is just a meal.
Right. And so people get all dramatic or upset at the table because something wasn't right or.
Correct.
Yeah.
It happens.
And they lose their mind. Right.
They do, and I think it's those guests that, kind of provide good, laughs after the end of the night, or maybe they're the reason for needing to have that end of drink cocktail or end of shift cocktail.
Right.
To just decompress.
Yeah.
But yeah, you see some crazy stuff. You saw some crazy stuff for sure.
I know.
Anytime you're serving alcohol past midnight,
yeah,
you're going to see some stuff.
I bet. That's so funny. So, okay, anything you want to share with me about this subject or anything else you want to get on out there into the world?
Gosh, I think that's it. Thanks for inviting me to come do this. It was fun to talk about the restaurant business. I feel like it was a different life for me. It was a long time ago, and it's always fun talking about it.
What would you say to somebody if you had a friend come to you and say that they wanted to start a restaurant?
I have one right now whose son is trying to start a restaurant. I would say if you're passionate about it, I would say go for it. I think there's always an opportunity to do it better than your competition. You need to live in that restaurant for a while and know that if it doesn't work, it may have nothing to do with you. There's such an element of luck when it comes to restaurants. Not knowing what's going to hit, what's going to resonate with people, what's going to make them feel a certain way. I mean, if it was that easy to do, you wouldn't see companies like, you wouldn't see companies out there like Cheesecake Factory going around and buying other startup concepts. They would create them themselves because that would be a lot less expensive. But it's not that easy. It's not. I mean, you've got some of the best restaurateurs in the world out there, or biggest restaurant companies in the world that go around buying concepts for acquisition. If they all have R&D departments, they all could go out and open up a restaurant concept and see if it would be successful, but not many of them are able to do it.
Mm-hmm. I like what you said, which is if you have the passion for it, it's like you have got to love cooking. Like you've got to love being in a restaurant, because otherwise your passion will never, when everything else fails, if you don't have the passion to keep you there, it will never work. And I think that's true in any business, but specifically in a restaurant, you got to love to cook. Dan, thank you. I hope you're one of my favorite people. I just love talking to you. I love going to restaurants with you. I love eating your food. You're an awesome person, an awesome host, an awesome friend, an awesome real estate agent. We talked about restaurants and food, and you're actually one of the best luxury real estate agents in Scottsdale in Arizona. Anyway, thank you for your time. Have a great rest of your weekend.
You too.